Oh. Okay. Well, hello everybody. Thank you for showing up. Another beautiful Monday morning, huh? Wow. I'd woken up this morning and what a golden sun had come out. What a beautiful state we have here in California. I tell you, verily, out in Oregon at the moment right now, it's rainy, it's cold. So it was a nice change of pace to wake up this morning with some golden sun. Some golden sun. Beautiful, beautiful. I'm going to try to be as loud as I can. Again, given a classroom today that does not have a microphone, so I'm going to have to be a little loud. Forgive me if y'all can't hear me. I will try to use a loud voice. Now, where were we? So last week, Thursday, we had started together our script, Not Voracity. Not Voracity. Now, if you remember what it was all about, I will read our synopsis. Let's read it together. Right after the unexplained death of her young son, Brendan Getty, a grieving single mother rebuilds her life into something controlled and precise, becoming a respectable legal consultant of a law firm known for her abilities of solving complex and high-stake cases. Right? A woman with determination. And, as far as for 30 years after losing her son, she goes through this metamorphosis of rebuilding her life and becoming living her life to the fullest potential as far as career and what she can get materialistically. But she avoids the emotional turmoil and chaos, right, of her past by relying on logic and structure and certainty of this career. So that control, of course, begins to fracture, right? When she is approached by a homeless young man who repetitively comes up to her and says, Mom, calls her mom, right? And so at first, of course, she dismisses this. This is some crazy homeless man coming up to me, whatever, who cares? But as he continues to confront her with these very revealing personal details that only her and her son, who was passed away, would know, these very intimate moments, no one would know, right? And so, as time goes by, she begins to kind of break a little bit and is forced into this rebirth, if you will, right? And at the same time, incidentally, she's working on a case. She's working on a case of someone who died from unexpected, some suspicious, by some suspicious means. Sorry, a little early in the morning, I'm kind of jumbling up my words here. But so she's working this case, and she has this homeless guy claiming to be her son. And inevitably, what happens is love comes in, and she realizes that that is actually indeed her son who had come back by unexplained means, right? And as we talked about last week in class, really, it doesn't matter if it is her son or if it isn't, because it is her son, right? The connection that is made, the way that this man has reached this woman's heart after 30 years of disassociating and just getting away from ever really looking at what happened. That love is so strong that it takes over. Anyway, folks, so that's our story, right? This is the script that we decided to work on, and we're going to go over some of the first two scenes is what we're going to do today. Is we're going to go over the first two scenes of the script, and then we're going to break it down and see why a story like this is so effective. Why this kind of storytelling, just in general, can really impact the people that watch it. Why our audience is going to be so involved, and how spiritual residue, if you remember we talked about spiritual residue, how spiritual residue is going to be implemented, and how that can be done. So here we go. Let's jump right into it, folks. This is not Voracity, written by Graham Smith and others. So here's our scene one. The scene one is going to exit into a suburban playground late in the afternoon. Okay? The golden light. See the golden light in this classroom? Golden light will be cascading on this little suburban playground. Okay, we're going to have children running around, and the wind will be moving oh so gently, oh so elegantly through the trees. Now a young mother sits on a bench and a stroller beside her. Inside it, our main character, Brendan Getty. Okay? 6 months old, watching the world. Little boy watching the world as it goes by, right? And this little park bench. And she studies him, right? Mama is watching her little boy. She's watching, she's studying. A breeze passes by, leaves a shift. And then light flickers across his face. You know, we're going to have the sun reflecting on his face in this beginning scene here. And he's laughing, right? Children are always laughing. It's a beautiful thing. And Mama, she looks over to him. She says, "Oh, did you feel that? Hey, you feel that?" Right? She says, "You're okay. You're always going to be okay." And so he stares upward, and she follows his gaze, and there's nothing there, right? And she hums a simple melody. Right? You know, as Mama does. Mama always sings to her baby. It's very common in humanity. I would hope so. Anyway, as she stops midway, and she kind of says to herself, but also talking to her son, "I never finish it. I never finish it." So she watches him, and the moment lingers. All right, so if you can imagine, we've got Mama and son, and they're sitting in this gentle little scene here on a peaceful little park bench, just having mom and son time together. And it's really, we're building the dynamic, right? We're showing you the relationship. We're showing you the depth between the connection, the bond, if you will, between a mom and her son. Okay? And that's our scene one. So now let's go to scene two. Scene two starts into a small apartment, and it's nighttime. And in the apartment is a warm, lived space, right? Very warm, lived-in space. Brendan, now 4 years old, runs through the room. Now, folks, what we're doing here is we're establishing a montage of Brendan kind of growing up, all leading up to the inevitability of him mysteriously passing away, and then the transformation of the mom. But we are building the way, we're paving the way for that to happen. So now Brendan's 4 years old, right? In the first scene he was 6 months, now he's 4. And Mama says to him, "Brendan, slow down," right? And he crashes into her, and she catches him. Hey! She says, "All right, okay. And she lifts him, and she holds him close. She holds him close. And he looks over to his mama and he says, "I'm fast." And she says, "You're reckless." And they both laugh together, right? She carries him, she picks him up, right? She carries him to the bedroom. Carries him to the bedroom. Okay, and so now we're inside the bedroom, right? Continuous. The scene goes. And he's in bed, and she's tucking him in. And he asks her, he looks up at her and he asks her, he says, why do I have that name? You know, the name Brendan, right? As the little kid wonders, right? The wonder, childlike wonder is a beautiful thing, folks. Don't ever lose childlike wonder. Great example right here, but he asks her, he says, why do I have that name, Mama? She says, well, it means brave. It means brave, child. That's one. And he replies, actually quite intelligently for this age to her. He says, I'm not brave. And she kind of straightens up, right? She kind of stiffens up, if you will. And she says, you are. Even when you're scared. And she hums again. Right? Singing her little nursery rhyme, if you will, type medley. And she stops midway again. And he looks up at her and he says, why do you stop? He likes the melody, right? Why do you stop? And she says, well, I don't know. And he says, you should finish it. You should finish the melody, right? The little boy loves it. He says, finish it, Mom. And she smiles, and she doesn't finish the song. Instead, she turns off the light, leaves the door slightly open, and that faint trace of the melody lingers in the room, right? Folks, there's an example of spiritual residue inside the script, inside the world that we're building. There will be spiritual residue, right? The faint trace of the melody lingers in the room, fills the room. That good energy is now in that room, left behind. So there's our first two scenes of Not Voracity. Perhaps we get into the real lesson now. But first thing I should do is double check my Zoomers. As I always do, folks. I always got to check my Zoom class, because my Zoom class seems to go pattywhackers on me all the time. So we got to make sure that we... All right, we're doing good. We're doing good. Okay, Zoom is still up. Thank you for all my Zoomers for showing up. I really appreciate it. It's hard to get people to show up in person, and it's hard to get people to show up on Zoom even. You know, life is busy. You know, we've all got things we're doing. We got work and family, and I got to feed the dog, and I got to take care of the goldfish, and I got to give the acorns to the squirrels. I had one gal, one of my students out in Oregon, she had pet squirrels that she had to go home and give them their milk and acorns and such, and so that's just cute, and I love all that and everything, and so, you know, we have daily lives, and so it's hard to keep up with our studies and our academia when we have such busy lives. But that's why it's so important that you show up, and that I personally appreciate it, because it's not every day that, you know, I can have a full class. So thank you again for being here. Okay. Enough of that. Let's jump into the first two scenes that we just read together, folks. So, scene 1 and 2. Here's a little bit of the background of what was going on there, right? So, the big picture, right? These scenes, right off the bat, these scenes are not about the plot. I know, you're looking at me like I'm crazy. What? The two scenes I just read are not about the plot. What the hell do I mean saying that, right? Well, I'll tell you what. These scenes are not about the plot. Rather, they establish the emotional reality before loss. If the audience does not believe the love, they will not feel the loss. I'll say that again. These scenes establish the emotional reality before loss. Because our audience, who we're trying to engage, who we are trying to draw in, if they do not believe the love between this mom and son, they will not feel the loss. And so we are soaking our audience into the atmosphere and into everything, right? So I got a little diagram here to show kind of how we do this. Okay. Let me see if I can't get it up here. Okay? There we go. So, I'm a little reversed here, so bear with me, so, scene 1, right? We have our presence. Our scene 1, right off the bat, is the presence. Okay, which then goes into the emotional observation, right? The stillness, the subtle spiritual awareness, right? Mom and son are in the park together in there, and we're showing the dynamic of her raising him and giving him the information he needs to become self-sustained, okay? And then it goes down to the promise made, okay? Or even before that, we have that song introduced, right? That's such an important part right there, is the little melody that Mama sings and doesn't finish. She only sings about half of it and then it stops, right? So that song is introduced, and what does that song signify? Symbolize, really, it's the promise, or it's the unfinished, right? We're throwing that theme of an unfinished event, an unfinished thing. Because the loss of her son, really, in a way, in a big way, has left her feeling unfinished, unfulfilled, if you will. Anyway, so then that leads us to the promise made, right? Which is the unconscious. You know, that's the connection. I love you forever. Right? The unconscious promise made, the love that she promises him. Right, and then that takes us to our scene 2. Right? Then we have some movement. Right? Brendan's a little boy and he's running around, he's having fun and everything. Okay? And we're showing that connection further between her and him. The physical contact, right? The hugging, she's picking him up and everything, and that just really defines the relationship between the two for that second scene. Okay? And then we go into the name, given meaning, right? The name is given meaning. And right after he asks her what his name means, which was brave, you know, then she jumps back with the song. She starts humming the song again, right? The song is repeated, which creates a pattern. And I find my place here. So the result of these sequence of events that I am describing to you is, you know, what we've created here is emotional attachment, number 1, memory, number 2, and that residue, spiritual residue, right? Which inevitably all these things are going to lead up to the future impact, right? So let's look at scene 1 again. Let's look at the function of the playground scene. Our function here is to establish presence and show the subtle spiritual residue. Observational tone creates the memory-like feeling. The mother is fully present. The mother is fully present in this playground scene, and she's showing love. She's showing intentional love, right? Okay, Brendan's gaze while he's sitting on that park bench suggests awareness, okay, beyond the visible. Okay, and then we have the song motive, right, is introduced once again, and that's the incomplete emotional loop, right? Okay, and then the promise, right? And yeah, and her promise, right? You're going to be okay. You're always going to be okay. That's what she says there in scene 1, and that's the promise, right? That promise plants future emotional irony, really, if you want to look at it that way. Because we're setting it all up here for what is going to happen later. So then let's go into our scene 2, which really it furthers that definite relationship and the deepened attachment. Okay? Scene 2 in the apartment. The energy shifts from the stillness at the park to the movement, right? To the running around, to the fun that Brendan's having in the apartment. And she's playing with him, right? And you know, the physical interaction, it's building the tactile memory, is what I'm trying to say, right? That memory, that physical memory, if you will, is tangible. It's created in that moment. Okay, and then the dialogue is built in a way that it reveals personality without exposition. Right? That's one of the biggest things you'll learn in this class is when you're writing a script, it's never about exposition. We trust our audience to be able to do that on their own subconscious time. Okay? Then after that, the name is brought up, right? What is my name and what does it mean? The name becomes an emotional anchor. Okay? Becomes this emotional anchor, which then leads into the repetition of the song, right? Which creates recognition. She sings this song again, and then it stops, right? And then that's when he comes in. He says, well, you should finish it, Mom. And in him saying that to her in response to her song, really it sets a future payoff for our audience, right? Because that song will be finished later in the film. And our ending image, right? That last scene, the faint trace of the melody lingers in the room, right? That was the scene. The ending image creates the pre-loss spiritual residue. I'll say that again. The ending of that scene, that ending image, creates the pre-loss spiritual residue. Okay? So let's look at the combined function of both these scenes. You know, we're establishing emotional truth, right? We're establishing emotional truth, this emotional truth dynamic between Brendan and his mom. And this is building that authentic relationship, right? We are immersing the audience in this very intimate relationship so that they feel the love. We plant repeating motives, which is the song gaze, or the song and the gaze that he has of wonder. And the name, brave. Brendan is brave. Okay? And so also what we're doing here is we're introducing, we're introducing the metaphysical tone subtly. Right? That metaphysical love, that tone is subtly introduced in these two scenes, right off the bat. So, you know, in essence, we are not, well, let me see how I word this. In essence, we are not necessarily setting up the plot. We are setting up the audience, what the audience should feel later. That's what we're setting up. We're not setting up the plot, we are setting up what the audience should feel later. Okay? And I think it's well done, it's established well and everything. These deeper themes are always needed to be put early on. Okay. Okay, looks like we're doing good so far. Now, I've got a couple more things to talk about as far as, you know, the deep dive of these two scenes and how it pertains to the whole picture in itself, right? So, but I got to double check that my Zoom class is still running. It looks like my internet's kind of janky, so I don't want to jump into it yet before I know for sure that that's working well. But let's just go to the first part, huh? So what are we doing here? Well, let's look at what I like to call the invisible contract with the audience, right? What we show early, and this pertains to any script, mind you. What you show early, the audience assumes will matter later. Okay? So that's why it's important. That's why it's absolutely crucial that you establish patterns and signals, okay, that teach the viewer how to watch your films. Okay, I'll say that again. The audience is going to assume what you put, you know, what you show will matter later, and so you need to establish the patterns and signals that will teach your audience, you know, really how to watch your film. Equip. Right? I love that word. We've got to equip our audience to watch what content we're putting down. Okay? And I'll get to the second point here in just a second. Let me double check our Zoom. Because I have a sixth sense that the internet's kicked us off.